Welcome back to CBS News election headquarters here in New York City. You know, when John McCain tapped Governor Sarah Palin of Alaska, many people were very surprised at his choice. She was relatively unknown, but an extremely popular governor with an 80% approval rating in the state of Alaska. Anthony Mason has some exit polling information on the Palin effect and how it affected the way voters made their choice today. Anthony?
Yeah, Katie, it looks like in a couple of key categories, it did cost John McCain some votes. We want to look first at moderate Republicans. And 46% of moderate Republicans we talked to on our exit poll said the choice of Sarah Palin was an important factor in their vote today. So how did they vote? Well, 21% actually went for Barack Obama. That may not seem like a big number, but it's actually double the national percentage of Republicans who voted for Obama. So clearly here, John McCain lost some votes because of the Sarah Palin choice, but it's more pronounced when you go to independents. 42% of independents told us that the Palin was an important factor in their vote. Where did they go? They went very strongly for Barack Obama, 58 to 42%. So there's clear evidence here, Katie, that the governor of Alaska ended up costing John McCain some votes today.
All right, Dan Bartlett, I know you have some views on Sarah Palin and the Palin effect. Was it a mistake in your mind? I know that it energized the base of the party a lot, but it did, as we just saw, turn off a lot of voters as well.
Right, Katie. I think when this was first announced, I said this was either going to be an enormous success or an enormous failure. And I think the McCain campaign knew themselves that it was a risky choice, that they had to take a chance, that if they ran a typical Republican campaign and therefore picked a typical candidate as vice president, that wouldn't shake things up enough to re-scramble the race and to his advantage. And I think what you've seen is that, and maybe in some of these traditional states she's been where she's got strong support within the Republican Party, that's been fine. But if you go to a Pennsylvania, somewhere, a true battleground state, somewhere where you're trying to wrestle away from the Democrats, a blue state, maybe that's where the problems lie, because it's not only what she says and what she does, but it's also a presidential judgment. The American people are looking at the president, the potential presidential candidate, making this big presidential decision, and some may have come to the conclusion that was more based on politics and not on governance.
So it might have been sort of one step forward for womankind, but it was sort of a couple of steps backwards, because it brought John McCain's age and health front and center once again, Dan, didn't it?
Well, some would make that argument, and I think to Palin's credit, though, or at least and put this in context, to ask anybody who's not been on the national stage and preparing for this job in a way in which you're out there conversing on all the issues is asking awful a lot. To go from 0 to 60 in one news cycle almost is an enormous challenge for anybody, much less somebody who, like I said, who is not in the slipstream of national media coverage and dealing with the twos and fros of a presidential campaign. So it was a risky choice, and we'll have to see how this data plays out in some of these key states to see if it was too risky of a choice.
And in many ways, he sort of lost the experience card, too, because Governor Palin had been governor of Alaska for only 18 months when she was tapped. And before that, the mayor of Wasilla, with population something like 6,000.
Well, there were a lot of people who were supporters of John McCain who were concerned that he was just getting traction over the summer on that very issue, the experience gap issue, and that by putting her on the ticket, it undermined that argument and that message. Again, these type of things will be debated in the days to come.
We should mention, Dan, thanks very much. McCain aide is recently quoted as saying, quote, "At this point, we need a miracle."
Well, I think at this point they do need a miracle. If I can just add on a little bit to what Dan Bartlett was talking about, I think these surveys are going to show that she was indeed a drag on this ticket. I still think it was the economy that's going to make the difference in this campaign. But Katie, you know, when she was picked, it seemed like a popular choice. She made a very good speech at the convention. It was a real big chance. But those interviews that you did with her, I mean, she made a terrible impression in those interviews. And I think that's when the bloom came off this rose right there. I mean, and I would say that even if you were not sitting here.
Well, thank you very much. Meanwhile, you know, the vice president's choice doesn't usually matter. Do you think in this case it did?
Yes.
Yeah.
She was Norma Ray for about 2 weeks, and then she was somebody else.